one, I would like to welcome you to the December 1st, 2020 City Council meeting tonight, held here at City Hall in Mount Pleasant, Texas, at 6:30. I'm Tim Dale, the Mayor Pro Tem. I will be conducting the meeting tonight in the absence of Mayor Craig. At this time, I would ask if you would please stand, and I will ask Councilman Walker to lead us in a word of prayer, followed by Councilman Chappelle, which will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Councilman. The first item on the agenda tonight will be to consider the approval of the minutes of our November 17th regular session meeting. I hope everyone's had a chance to review them. Any questions or concerns, we can discuss that at this time. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion we consider approval of minutes of November 17, 2020 meeting.
Second.
It just takes one vote and one second. So we're doing all the items first on the consent agenda, and then you take a vote and take a motion and then a vote on all of them. Yes. No, the consent agenda is each item. We can discuss each item one at a time, and then at the end, you take one motion and then one yes, ma'am, on all of them at one time.
So we need a motion.
This is the first time that we're doing it like this, correct? Okay. That'll be fine, thank you. Item 2 will be to consider the approval of Resolution 2020-19 for the sale of Lot 12, Block 3, in the Lindy Addition in the city of Mount Pleasant to Cleveland Robertson.
Mayor and Council, our tax attorney, Tim Taylor, brought this to us. We've done these before. He's made a bid on this property, and it's at McKinnon and Lewis, I believe. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Just for the public, this property is located there on Lewis Street. As Miss Darlene said, the tax appraisal at the time of the suit was $1,500 for this lot, which is vacant. Judgment amount is $1,198.40. Mr. Cleveland Robertson has offered $1,850.05 for this vacant lot.
Has Mr. Robertson indicated what he wants to do with this piece of property?
No, sir, he did not.
It will put it back on the tax roll, and I believe I noticed here it had been taken off in March of 2015. So nearly 5 years it's been off our tax roll, so at least we'll get it back on the tax roll. And is there?
I'd like to ask code enforcement a question about this one actually. It butts up to Pilgrim's property, and all of us have been aware of Miss Young's concerns over there, and we have some discussion with them about a fence, and the actual fence will abut this property. Are we moving forward with requiring Pilgrims to build the fence along all of to separate the industrial from the residential? Are we moving forward with that?
Councilman Adams, we've been looking into that. There is some discussion that we've had with Mr. Thatcher on how we are able to move that. We're going to have to really talk to our legal counsel after, looking at the ordinances and looking at the history of Pilgrims and what they built out there in the past and what we can mandate. We're still going to have to get some legal direction and go back to Pilgrims and talk to them on that.
My only concern with that would be is if we're putting this back on the roll for a residential piece of property, are we fixing to put ourselves in the same situation where we have a resident that is concerned constantly about separation of that property? I guess my question would be, as code enforcement, do I have the same understanding as y'all have that there does need to be that separation in place?
There does, but the fact that what we've kind of been discovering is that the ordinance actually relates to when somebody establishes a use. In other words, if Pilgrims establishes a use on a property, even though they own the property, until they establish a use on it, it appears that those requirements don't actually kick in, and that's usually the way it is on most screening mechanisms. If you have a business and have it zoned that way, until they establish a use, if it's zoned for something like industrial or commercial, until that actual commercial occurs, that's when the requirement for the screening is required by the city. And that's basically the way the ordinance actually reads at this point. So that's what I was kind of alluding to, that we need to get some more direction, legal direction from that, how we might proceed.
But what is that property with Pilgrims already zoned? Isn't it industrial? Even that parking lot that butts up to the back of this property we're talking about? So isn't that already a use?
But you had said that there's not a house there at the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may be just the same thing, and it's a district. If they establish it, if Pilgrims had already established their use, it's like a retro thing. You can't come back in, and if they're going to build a home there, it doesn't necessarily require that. If Pilgrims had already owned that property for all its duration, so we need to look at it.
I just don't want somebody to come up here beating us over the head with the complaint. If it's true that Pilgrims is established and we're passing an unused piece of property, if they build a residence there, would Pilgrims be required to build anything if they're there first? You know what I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I've witnessed this before. It's generally kind of the backwards thing. I'll give you an example then. Just an example. Usually when you have liquor issues or sale of alcohol, if they've established an establishment with a restaurant that had sale of liquor, and next there's a 300-foot mandatory distance requirement front door to front door, and just so happens that a school moves in next door or a church, then that restaurant doesn't lose the right to continue to use alcohol there. So it's kind of one and the same in a sense. If Pilgrims has established their use there, I don't know legally if the city could come back and force that screening mechanism going after the fact. It's at the point when they establish the use on the property, that's when if they abut a district when they establish the use, then we would be they'd be forced to put in the screen. If that answers what you're saying.
Councilman, also, what we're doing is there's other places where it's obvious where they need to extend fences. So that we've got some areas. This area we're trying to decide if there's a few lots in between where they are established, and we got to get with Kerry and say does it apply only when they're right up next to them on that lot, or if they own all of it back to where they're. So that's the part, but there are other areas they need to do it, and we're gonna get it all together and then go talk to them. We'll show you what we mean.
Robert, can you clarify one more thing for myself and the rest of the council? Am I understanding you correctly that a home or a house or a building has to be on that residential piece of property for this screening to be in effect, even if there's nothing on the property?
It's kind of going, I'm saying that if the Pilgrims had established their use out there at this time, you know, and I don't know that there was, obviously there was an offense there. There is, I'm not sure what we're looking at. I'm not sure exactly what the law said. So I'd have to look at it. But it's generally if a business establishes their use there, and at that moment they weren't, if there wasn't a home there, then when the Pilgrims was put in, they should have put, if they were abutting a residential home at the time they established the Pilgrims, then they would have had to put the fence out.
Robert, if a business or Pilgrims establishes their business there and it's a vacant lot, but it's zoned residential, they still have a requirement to put the screening fence up.
That's the way I think I read the ordinance, that if it were going to do that, yes, sir. And I don't know which lot it is, and I guess there's not a fence there currently.
Thank you, Robert.
Do y'all understand which lot it is? Okay, have all of you looked at it? Okay.
Any more questions, comments, discussion? If not, we'll move on to item 3. This is to consider the approval of ordinance 2020-22, amending ordinance 2020-12 of the 2020-21 physical budget, increasing the capital budget fund. This is to create a project budget for the donations by Pilgrims. Ms. Reeves, do you have a presentation for us?
Mayor and council, I want to also just mention that we were told by Pilgrims that total fund is 1.48, I think, or something like that. It's not quite 1.5.
Push the button there, please.
This is to bring in the project funds that was donated by Pilgrims for the community center. I've created a special fund to track the money for that. I've put it in sort of a graph form. This will be a year-to-year project fund that carries over until the funds are spent. This is not one of those funds that just closes out at the end of the year. Project funds will continue until the funds are expended. I have initially put in $100,000 because we haven't received any upfront money for that, just to cover some of the planning fees and contractual fees that we've done on some of the initial design work on it. And then that money will go towards some of the other expenses that we will have to cover later on in the project. We're requesting approval.
It's my understanding, though, the money the city will be paying as the bills come in, and we will be giving those bills to Pilgrims, and they will be reimbursing the city for those. Is that correct?
My understanding is that, yes, we'll be reimbursed on like a quarterly basis.
So we put $100,000 in there of city's money, and then we're expecting the 1.48 or 1.45.
Yeah, when we get ready to start it, they'll give us 30% or 35% of the project money. And when we've used that up, get close to using it, and we're 35% into it, then we'll request the rest of it, and they'll put the rest of the 65% into a fund, and then we'll expend that out. It's our estimate in talking with the architect that it'll take most of the 1.4 to do the center and the driveway and the parking and so forth, and that we could for the other 100,000 or whatever, we can contract and put the roof on the. We have a little glitch with the roof. There's with that slab. There's a power line that runs right down over the basketball slab that has to be moved, and could be quite expensive. Now, Pilgrims said that they were going to work on getting that done. And so but until we get that done, there we no design work or anything done until we make sure that power line can be moved.
That is a SWEPCO line that goes across there, correct? And we're talking about the basketball court there that's uncovered now that the city is looking at putting a cover over just for the public. So these funds would go toward that.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Mikhail, did they say when we would receive the first 35% of payment?
Yes, they did, and that's when we're ready when we've got the plans ready and we bid it out, and we bid it and do a contract on it, they give us the first 35%.
Any other questions or comments?
Is that bid process going on right now?
No, the design is going on right now. And in fact, we've got we had a meeting, we need to get our group together, and they showed us a floor plan that looks really good. I think you guys saw it. They went over some details with us that we need to get with you. They're going to give something back to us within this week, I think. So next week or so we'll meet on it, make sure we're in good progress. But they're putting all the specs together. They just done the design on the plan.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mikhail. We'll move on to item number 4, which is consider approval of ordinance 2020-23, amending the 2020-21 physical budget to increase the capital fund 681. That is to create a park project budget to better able to track remaining bond money that we have. And would you like to address that, Mr. Reeves?
I've gone back over the past 4 years and tracked all of the original $9 million bond fund money that was for the sports park complex and animal control building and the radios, and I've created a project fund for it as well, just because I wanted to see how much money was left in that bond, and so that we could see how much was allocated for the future park. And so I've created a project fund budget for it as well, to bring in the remaining money. We have about $826,000 remaining in that fund, and I want to be able to track that with what we have left to pay out Symmetry to complete the signs, the entryway, and we just have a few other things left there. We should have plenty of money left to complete the work that y'all want done out there, including the lighting around the playground and things like that. But I just want to be able to track it and just make sure that we have enough to complete all the stuff that y'all want done. And I want to bring it in and be able to budget it and keep up with it. And then after tonight, I'll start presenting this as part of your financial statements.
That'll be good.
Mikhail, have you gone over these numbers with Lanny?
I have, and I've actually got with him on remaining amounts to be spent and what the amounts were that were bid out for the lighting and everything, and we've worked very close together to make sure that the remaining money would be sufficient to cover remaining expenses. We should have a little bit money left over, but I don't know what's going to come up still that's going to need to be done. I think there's about roughly $126,000 left after we've finished with all the stuff that y'all have. So we want to still keep that there, and it's good to have a little bit of a contingency left, but we'll see what happens after we go through and see what else needs to be fixed.
Mikhail,
This will include the 2 arches on both sides and the additional sign, as well as the lighting. And I understand that the plans on the arches, middle of this month, Lanny, did you say middle of this month should be, so we'll get them to you?
so this money here should cover our agenda item for the proposed change order number 2 for Symmetry there, correct?
Yes, sir, it does.
You're talking about having, after everything, maybe 120, just ballpark right now. I was out there today at the park, and it's really taken a lot of shape here in the last couple of weeks. It really has. I noticed they have the signs there. They have the structure there that's, that'll go in the ground and kind of at the angle and all that you can see. So if you get a chance to run by, you can, they cleaned it out on both entrances there. It looks a lot nicer.
By the way, the cleaning out on the entrances is our Parks Department.
And that's just assuming nothing else comes up between now and getting everything done. But, I mean, we'll just have to see what else comes up.
And to make sure, Ed, I understood you right, that this money here she found here would cover the gateway arches at both. Okay.
Any other questions or comments concerning this item? If not, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is to consider approval of ordinance 2020-24, amending the 2020-21 budget for increasing the expenditures in the police special fund. And this is to roll over the police special funds into the new year.
Generally, the police department has several special funds. They have the tobacco enforcement funds, the law enforcement education fund, they have a donation fund, and then they have the seizures forfeiture funds. Usually there's, you never really know exactly how much money they're going to have left over in their budget until we close out the fiscal year and balance all their books. And so we usually do a rollover amendment to roll over any remaining funds into the new budget year. And so that's what this budget amendment does. It rolls over all their special funds and creates a budget for them. I typically try to estimate in our 2021 budget what those numbers are, but once we get the final numbers in, I like to make those funds available for them. I have reviewed these numbers with Chief Bowman. He is in agreement with what these budget amendments are and where they are in the budget amendment, and these are just their remaining funds for them to spend and use for the benefit to equip the police department.
Just for the public, the dollar amount on that?
So for the seizures, there's about $36,315 that we're bringing in from previous year. And in the donation fund, there's about $21,600. In the LEOSC account, there's about $7,494. In the tobacco enforcement, there's about $9,768.
Does Chief Booman already know kind of what he wants to do with this extra money?
Well, no, but we already have, for example, we have an officer who's currently at a canine training school, and we are purchasing a new canine dog, and those funds have already been put on purchase orders. So we just need to cut that check. So that was part of it from the canine fund. So as those things come up, for example, vet bills and stuff like that also come out of that same fund. So it's just already budgeted in there, so we can use those, pay for those as they come along.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to agenda item number 6. This is to consider approval of ordinance 2020-25, amending the 2020-21 budget to increase the tourism fund 409. This is to bring in carried over funds from the Main Street.
This was, again, to true up the Main Street budget. Also, we added a little bit of extra money in the downtown area for some lights, to do a little bit more in Caldwell Park. We added a few more things in that area. They had some money in fund balance also with the facade grant that we wanted to bring over that they did not spend down there in their Main Street board. So we brought that into this budget also. So this is just amending the Main Street board's grant to bring their money forward that they didn't spend in prior year, and also to cover some of the extra expenditures for the lights downtown.
Again, the dollar amount on that.
The total amount that we brought forward from 2020 carryover was $50,300.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or concerns or any comments? If not, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is to consider the approval of ordinance 2020-26, amending the 2020-21 budget to increase the water construction fund 605.
This was to create a project fund for the $4 million bond that we issued. We have several projects going on. We have gone over these with KSA, have done several presentations to y'all where y'all have actually awarded these contracts and we have bid these out. There's a list of the contracts in your packet for the individual amounts. And so what I want to do with these is, again, create a project fund so we can track all of this bond money and track what these contracts are that y'all have approved for these individual lines so that we can keep up with how much money we're spending of this. Now, we know that total, most of these projects are going to come to around $8 million, especially. A lot of these are in engineering phases. But once we get out of engineering phases of most of these projects, they'll go into construction phases. And then once we get into the construction phases, when we'll probably need the rest of that money for the $4 million. But I really want to be able to track all of this, keep up with it again, and give y'all a report, which y'all will see this report now with your annual, your monthly financials. You'll be able to see where this $4 million is, how much of it we've spent, where we are, and then when we get ready to issue our additional $4 million to complete these projects, it won't be a surprise to y'all because y'all know exactly where we are. You'll know how much of this $4 million we have remaining and where we are on these projects and where we are on our project budgets. And then hopefully KSA can give y'all a continued update on where we are on these individual projects, but you'll be able to see it financially also where we are on these budgeted projects, because as we spend them and we approve them, then I'll be presenting them to you here. And again, this will be one of those ones that does not end at the end of this fiscal year. It'll just continue to roll from year to year. And you'll just be able to track the expenditures because it'll be one of those capital project budgets that continue.
That'll be very good accountability. Any comments, questions, concerns? If not, at this time, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is to consider approval of ordinance 2020-7, amending the 2020-21 budget to increase the library grant fund 408.
And this is Miss Helen received a grant for $15,000 to complete a project that she's been working on over at the library. And this is for $15,000. And this is to bring in her library grant and to bring her library grant fund back so she can continue her project. Her total project is about $30,000 to convert her newspapers to digital. And she's been working on that diligently. And so this $15,000 will bring her about halfway to completion. So I wanted to bring this in.
Mayor and Council, if you remember back in the budget, we had $30,000 or requested $30,000. That's what it would take to bring all the publications into digital. So that's what libraries have been done for years, and we're trying to get there. We cut that amount out to try to, so we could get the cuts we needed and balance the budget. Helen did go after a grant and was just awarded half of that. And I would like to have us consider taking $15,000 more out of contingency and put it in there so that this year we can complete that project. Or we can ask for it at the end of the year, but we really need to not just go part way. We need to complete the digitization of the project.
Was 30,000 and we have 15, and then you got 7,500 additional, or?
No, she just received a $15,000. Yeah, that's half of it, and she needs another 15. And if you would like, then you can amend what I've presented to add 15,000 from contingency, and that would be the budget amendment.
I have a question. I don't want to put her on the spot, but could she come back and explain what it is? That's been a while before we look at it from that angle.
UNT several years ago began a project called the Portal to Texas History. And across the state of Texas, pretty much all of the newspapers are, they're all becoming digitized, and they're putting them on, with the UNT's putting them on their site. And anybody in the world now can go on there and look and see anything they want to look up in Texas. It's not just newspapers, but it's land grants, you name it. It's anything to do with the history of Texas. It's a phenomenal site. When you look at it, budget several hours, because it's one of these things you get on, you can't get off. And we actually began digitizing 5 years ago because I asked the Hampshire Foundation for money to begin with, and they sent me $10,000 5 years ago. And I remember looking at the check and said, this is bad when you're disappointed because it was just $10,000. But we began with that and just haven't been able to get any more money since then. Until this year, I went back to Hampshire and asked again, and they awarded me $15,000. Now, I've already talked to UNT, and it's supposed to be $15,000 more that we're going to need, but I may be able to talk them down to 10. So we're kind of in negotiations about that.
This will digitize more than just the newspapers. I mean, there's a lot more to it.
Well, for us, it'll just be newspapers, and we began with our microfilm that goes back to the 1800s, and we've gotten part of that done. But it's the rest of the microfilm, and then we have all of the newspapers that didn't get destroyed in the floods. If you remember, Tim, the floods they had in the old library, we lost, 15 or 20 years worth of newspapers then. But we've got a whole room, if you want to, y'all want to come look at it, full of print. But the problem with print is that it's paper, so it deteriorates, and in a few years, the oldest ones of these won't be there anymore because they're going to fall completely apart. So it's either digitize or lose them. That's really what it boils down to.
So do you have the scanning equipment you need to scan those papers?
Actually, we just we box it all up and send it to UNT, and they do all of that.
So do they also give us a hard copy of it as well to have?
We don't get a hard copy, but it's all on the internet. Every bit of it is.
We can't request like a DVD or USB thumb drive with the soft copy of that on there for backup purposes in case they ever have some kind of catastrophic failure on their end, that we can still have that information available for us?
I can ask. I can sure ask about it.
Just in line of that, and going forward, from now on, will we be putting all of our papers into that system going forward?
Sherry, that's important. This will pay forever. We won't owe them any more money. So from year to every year, then we'll just box up all the newspapers and send them to them. So it's a continuing thing. Once we paid the upfront cost, then we're through with the money part. It goes on forever.
Mikhail, I'd like to ask a question. With COVID and some of the grant money that you've been able to do some really neat work with, people aren't can't get out and into the library like they could. Could we possibly apply for some of that COVID money for that, to digitize that so people could have access to it? Could we word it that way?
I can look into that and check to see. I'm not sure, but I'll definitely look into that and see if that's something that qualifies. Normally, the grants are written, the ones that I've been looking to is for the prevention of COVID, or, but I'll look and see if maybe there's a different grant or something maybe that we can qualify for, or if there's maybe another one out there that's, for libraries, because there's quite a few grants out there right now, so.
That's just there with the ability to look into stuff like that, maybe there's something out there, and if there is, that's fine. If not, I understand that as well, but if it's out there, we might as well get part of it.
Yes, sir.
Why don't we look into that first and see if there's some funds there, if you can, some of the funds that are available, if you can apply for, that it would qualify under this, and if not, then we can revisit at after the first of the year there at a meeting. And
I just had one last question for you. Do they send us the hard copy papers back, or do they keep them and archive them?
So far, they sent all of our microfilm back. So I'm guessing they'll send the papers back too, although the truth is, Henry, I don't know what we're going to do with them.
My guess is that they have a backup contingency plan in the cloud and that kind of thing. I'm sure they do. We ought to check with them to see, 'cause if they lose something, they've got to have a way to restore it.
If you don't mind, when you reach out to them, just ask them if they have what they call geo redundancy. What Ed's talking about, that means they've got it in the cloud. They got it stored on servers in multiple geographical locations, and that would be their strategy or their plan for catastrophic failures. You know, if they had a physical location get hit by a tornado, a hurricane, what have you, geographically another location off-site in another state would still have that information available for us.
Alan, I got a question. You said that once we pay the money, then forever we don't have to pay any more. So are we able to do any work now with the little bit money we have, or do we need the entire amount to pay that up and get the work done?
No, we can go ahead and start with what we have. I don't know how far the 15 will go, but talking with them, they're really willing to work with us and do everything they can.
If 30,000 went forever, and 15 ought to get us halfway to forever.
Ms. Helen, I have a question. Ms. Helen, how many of the college kids and the school kids use that kind of stuff for their research?
It's actually used a lot more than you think, and so many older people are doing the Ancestry.com and the Ancestry stuff, and they're using it like crazy. And then people will come in and say, you know, they'll say, I need a blue book that's got a picture of a baseball on the front. They'll come in and say, 30 or 40 years ago, Tasty Freeze had something, and I'm looking for that article. And we'll start stacking up newspapers, and we'll have people spend all day over there with those things.
But and I appreciate that. But particularly back to the education, the kids in school and the colleges and stuff. And I'm not trying to put it on them, but I didn't know if maybe they had a little something they could contribute because the kids need to do research. Just saying, you know, if all the schools pitch in a few bucks to have all that available through to help, because they like their kids to be able to get online and do all their research. Just as a thought.
Right. You know, I know they're doing everything online, and when we were staying open till late on Thursdays, which we're not now, but we will again in the future, that's where all of our business came from, was the kids coming in, because, you know, we're under the misconception that every child has a computer at home and access to the internet. They don't. So, yeah, and I'll call NTCC and see if there's anything they can do, because I think we'd have.
They might would contribute a small amount just to expedite this and get it all up quicker.
Well, I'll call the librarian out there and see if we can do.
I think it would be used for sure. I think it'd be a very useful tool for the whole community and people that's moved away and looking back at something from their ancestry. I think it'd be great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mikhail. Any more comments, questions, suggestions on this item? If not, we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is consider approval of proposed. This is our new way of doing things tonight. So, okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion concerning the agenda items that we've discussed.
I make a motion that we consider approval of all 8 consent agenda items.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Chappelle, a second by Councilwoman Sproul. At this time, Madam Secretary, I'll ask that you take a vote.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
Chappelle.
Aye.
All passed unanimously. Thank you, council. At this time, we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is consider approval of proposed change order number 2 for the Mount Pleasant Sports Complex from Symmetry Sports Construction. And here to answer any questions and go over is Mr. Lanny Buck with KSA.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. What you have before you is the change order number 2, which is a proposed third entry sign for the sports complex project, and this will be the one going on the north side, or further north of the entryway there. And the proposed change order amount is $49,897, and that includes the sign and the borings for the water, irrigation, electrical, and putting the sign up, the structural and all.
Did TxDOT ever let you know if we can clear part of that hill that obstructs the view on the north side there?
I don't know that I ever got an answer out of TxDOT for that. I think we have cleared that hill down a little bit so that we can flatten this out for the sign, but the hill up there on the rest, I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't think I've ever heard that answer.
It has been cleared some. I noticed today it looks a lot better coming from the north. You'll be able to see the entrance sign there. And this includes the necessary dirt work, the boring for electrical, concrete footing for the columns, the steel structure, the masonry, the entry sign to match the other two, all the wiring and lighting for the signs, landscaping, irrigation is what's just for the public. That's what's included in this $49,000.
Yes, sir. It's a turnkey to match the other side, plus get the power and water and everything to it.
And you're satisfied with the price?
I believe the price is something that we can deal with on this project. Yes, sir. I think the price is a little bit more than I would expect, but to keep the signage and everything in the warranty of the contractor, to have a turnkey and have him responsible for everything, I believe this is a good price for that.
Any comments, questions to Mr. Buck?
Well, along those lines, did we get the geotech study back for the foundation piers for the gateway main support post structures for both entries?
That is, yes, we've got that back, and that's in design right now for the archway, and that's what we should have in a couple of weeks to get back to you. My thought process is, can't promise, but I believe by the next council meeting we should be able to give you some draft plans to go back and so we can start getting the process on that.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Lanny. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 10. If there's no other questions or consideration on this, I'll entertain a motion on item number 9.
I move that we accept change order number 2 for the Mount Pleasant Sports Complex.
I'll second that.
A motion was made by Councilmember Adams and seconded by Councilmember Chappelle. Madam Secretary, would you record the vote, please?
Councilman Adams.
Aye.
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 The vote was unanimous. At this time, we'll move on to item number 10, which is consider the approval of pay request for ETTL for work on the new sports complex, which the financial impact is $3,225, and Lanny Buck is back again to explain it to us.
This was an invoice that was sent to us back in September, I believe, and somehow, we'll call this one lost in the mail or something, but this was for just a very short period of time where we were doing rolling patterns testing, density testing for the road, and that work, and that's essentially what this this is for that period of time that we were doing that.
So I'm sure you've gone back and double checked and made sure this didn't overlap the previous ones we've paid in the.
I've triple checked it. I've got a list of all the invoices that I have printed out. I've checked the budget that we have for the materials testing, and we've still got like $14,000 left in that account too. So this is covered, and this, I could not find a repeat of this number anywhere. So I believe this is an extra number. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
Here in the agenda details, it says the financial impact is $3,225, but the invoice shows $3,658. I don't know where the discrepancy is.
I went back and researched those, and there's no invoice number that matched that, and we had overpaid on one invoice, so there was a credit for that. So I checked all the agendas previously to make sure that, like Lanny did, that none of these invoices were on there, and this one was not. And so we overpaid one, and that's what that credit is.
That's a good catch, Darlene.
Yeah, so that's basically the $3,600 and something minus the $400 that we overpaid.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Lanny. At this time, I'll entertain a motion concerning this agenda item 10.
I make a motion we consider approval of pay request from ETTL for the work on new sports complex.
I'll second the motion.
Have a motion made by Councilmember Chappelle and seconded by Councilmember Adams. Madam Secretary, if you'd record the vote, please.
Councilman Adams?
Aye.
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 The vote was unanimous. At this time, we'll move on to agenda item number 11, which is consider amendment to professional services agreement with KSA Engineers Incorporated for I-30 storage tank rehabilitation project. Concerning the storage tank, and back with us is Lanny Buck with KSA.
So we've got a current project ongoing where we're doing design services for the I-30 storage tank rehabilitation project. During this project, TCEQ has come back to the city, and they've done this before on numerous times. And essentially, the ammonia building, the way the ammonia is put into the water system is not the way the TCEQ wants it done per their rules. And they want an outside building to put the ammonia in outside so that we're having the chemicals separated. And so what this is to essentially include that chemical building inside of this project that we've already got, and the additional funds that we're asking for is to design that chemical building in that addition that's required by TCEQ.
So they came back after the fact and said, we need you to do this after we got the initial numbers for this project, and that's why we see this additional $26,000.
This is actually something that's been going on for way before this project. We're just trying to include it in this project. This has been a TCEQ mentioned on many reports for how many years, Anthony? 4? So it was way before this project that they've been putting this on the report. We're just hoping to include, what we're proposing is that we include it in this project, and we think the money will work out so that we can include it in this project and get it taken care of so the PCQ won't keep citing it.
I think the question is, why didn't it get put, if it's been 4 years old, why didn't it get put in up front? It's Anthony's fault.
This has been an ongoing, typical TCQ changing the rules. And so they never made themselves plain as to what they wanted. And then last year, they made it plainer. And so then we requested for KSA to come in and look while we were doing the upcoming projects to get the water tank painted. And to add this instead of us taking out of our regular budget, because this is on their list of violations. It's not a a binding violation, but it could be. So we want to get it corrected, and we thought we'd just tie it into this project.
And so will this enclosure be constructed like underneath the tank, or where would it be placed?
Oh, I put, raise the thing. Okay. What it is the piping that goes into the building now goes in just pure ammonia and then mixes with the water. And what they want it to be mixed before it goes into the building for safety for the guys, which I totally agree with. So that's what we're doing.
Any other questions or comments or anything else, Lanny?
Not on that subject. Like I said, this is just a good time for us to catch up with the TCEQ violation or proposed violation and get it taken care of. It's been ongoing for a while, and it just needs to be taken care of.
And will we need to be doing this on any future water tanks?
Any more suggestions or questions, concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 11 concerning the professional service agreement with KSA for the tank rehabilitation project.
I'll make a motion that we amend the professional services agreement with KSA Engineers for the I-30 storage tank project.
I'll second.
Have a motion made by Councilmember Adams and seconded by Councilmember Chappelle. Madam Secretary, ask you record the vote, please.
Aye.
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 The vote was unanimous. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 12. This item is to consider approval of a contract with KSA for work on Towne Lake Spillway Bridge concerning a spillway contract. And Lenny Buck with KSA is back again.
Thank you once again. So what we got in front of you right now, as you know, we've got a concern at the Towne Lake Spillway, and we've come back to you with a proposal and this proposal will include design fees, construction, geotechnical, historical commission, work with the Corps of Engineers to get the spillway rehabbed, as well as the pedestrian bridge or the bridge out there replaced, as well as the irrigation piping that's on the bridge that's out there right now, and some electrical that's on the bridge right now. We've left this together at this time to try to get it all in there together. This does not include the emergency spillways, which we may or may not have to do, but this includes everything else. We've got it down to a point. We have been working with the Corps of Engineers and with the Historical Commission. We think we may have some savings on this. One of our costs on this is an hourly cost to do the historical correspondence and everything. We think we've got a shortcut on that because they have inspected this spillway before, and they said they have actually documented their findings out there, but they can't find their documentation right now. So we're working on that. It's kind of like we were talking about a while ago with the scanning. It's in a hard copy right now, and it's the holidays, and so we're having a little bit of trouble getting to that. But this is to do all of that work to actually complete the project at that area, and we're getting closer and closer to a real handle on it. As I've noted before, our purpose of this is to get a bridge that's cost effective out there and to serve the same function as it did before.
Hey, Lanny, can you kind of explain to us here the calendar month breakdown? I see the numbers there, but are some of these going to be worked in parallel, or is it going to be a 40-plus month project?
So what, no, so this is a total from notice to proceed is 12 months is what we're saying. If we're looking at, so I'm looking at the page sheet 4. Yeah, so it's 12 months for notice to proceed. So what we're saying is it's gonna take 3 hours to get, or 3 months to get approval from the historical cultural resources, and it'll take another 2 months before we can get Army Corps of Engineers permit, and then we'll be able to go. Now, to tell you that we're gonna wait during that period of time, I cannot, because our idea is that we're gonna be designing in parallel with this. Because we've already talked to them and we know pretty much what we could do now. We just don't have it in writing yet. So we're gonna take off and try to design this in parallel so that when we get to, they give us the permit, we can bid it at that point.
Be a step or two ahead of them.
The idea is to stay a step, timing seems to be important in this project, so we're trying to stay a step or two ahead of the project.
Absolutely it is. The quicker the better. Hopefully some of these months that are 3 and 5 will turn into be a 1 or 2 month maybe.
And that's what I was hoping for. Like I said, I think we got to where we can cut those down a couple of months. That takes it from 12 to 10. You know, it's just, so that's our idea, is to cut those down as quick as we can. The thing that you know is always when you're dealing with the historical commission, you never know, but we're going to be designing in parallel as we're getting approved.
And is the country club already aware of this proposed timeline for construction, or is that something that they'll be notified after tonight's meeting that this is going to take approximately 12 months?
I told them 12 to 18 months from the beginning, unless Ed says something. I mean, that's pretty much what we told them. And we told them that we're going to have a bridge design in 6 months, but we told them that from the beginning.
Yeah, we told them that we're going to design the bridge and look for an alternative or whatever. They want to go back in the same place that this is, and we don't think, Lanny and I don't think the Corps and the Historical Society, they're going to allow us to have a bridge right in the middle of our construction project. So if it goes there, it's got to wait till after. And if they want to put it at a new location, then there's some redesign they've got to do on the landfill. We were going to look to see in this study if it could go somewhere else, if that helps them, gets it in 6 to 12 months or something. But it would actually move it from where it's got to go back to.
In worst case scenarios, we'll span that entire 9,500 feet there, but we can't go back with columns inside the spillway anymore. That's not going to be acceptable.
I'd just say, and that would be important to work with them as much as possible. I mean, as long as everybody's up front and honest with each other, how long it's going to take, they can make a decision whether it needs to be moved or in the same spot. If it's in the same spot, it's going to take longer, correct?
We say yes because we've got to build the reservoir and the dam and the spillway and then put the bridge over.
Laney, do you have anybody showing interest in bidding on this project so far?
The answer to that's really yes and no. I mean, we have people that the country club has come forward with that want to build the bridge, and we're going to try to specify materials that can meet with those methods.
So will KSA be actually overseeing this project?
Absolutely, because this is a high hazard dam, and as you can imagine, if this thing breaks and it goes down, and really it's the RV park right downstream, if you can imagine, they camp right next to this thing. So if it breaches and goes, there's always a danger there. So we want to make sure this is right, and this is something we have to stand behind.
This is the contract that we're approving tonight is strictly for you guys to oversee, and
this is design, bid, oversee construction, certified after it's done.
I'd just like to kind of echo Councilwoman Spruill, if we can possibly use local people. The city, and council people in particular, I think we understand what the country club means to our community. It's a 18-hole course that a lot of people don't have. I think it means a lot to our community, for our schools to have the ability to go out, our local clubs and stuff like that, to be able to go out and have days where they raise funds and have things like that out there. And so if people that are attached to the country club itself want to have some ability to give back to us as well, maybe all of us working together can get this done for a little cheaper price.
Yes, sir. And one of the things that we anticipate doing on this project that we don't normally do for sure is we'll take some of the sketches that we come up with for the bridge concept to start with and get it over to the city and make sure that they're in agreement with it. And then we can release some of those sketches out to the local vendors that may or may not be interested in this, and just see, what their thought processes are. My purpose of doing that, even though it's a little bit different, my purpose of doing that is also to give them a chance to comment on this thing before I put it in final form, and that way we can possibly get that help. I mean, I know they're in business to make money, and they've got to make money with their services too, but using local is important to everybody.
Is it possible that we could also entertain the idea of having some of these local businesses look at the option of constructing a temporary bridge for them so they can continue to use the 18 holes during this permanent solution?
That's not something that's in this, but sure, I mean, we can come up with your idea there. My hesitation with that is that we're going to have to get the geotechnical done and the piers in before you put anything out there, because we can't damage that historical structure that's there right now, or we're going to have to move it to another location, like Mr. Thatcher said, and they're going to have to backtrack. And then it becomes an economic thing. Do you want to spend the money on a temporary structure, or do you want to give it another few months and get this thing done right?
Any money we spend on the temporary, it will help the country club, but it'll be money that's wasted, a bunch of money that's wasted. The bridge can be moved to another site, but the footings and everything you put in will be wasted because you're going to move it back to another place. So anything that's temporary is money that you use for 4 or 6 months or so, and then for 18 months, and then it's gone. So it's okay to do that. We can do that, but they don't have any money. We're the one that's coming up with the money.
There are companies out there that have these freestanding bridges, mobile bridges that you can deploy across, I don't know what's the widest span that they offer, but I know those are available on the market out there that we could look at, maybe a rental option. I don't know.
Well, and there are all types of options out there. My big concern on this is you're once again in a historical structure. And anything we do to damage it is going to cost us a lot of money to put back. It's not like building new. It's like building old, and it costs a lot of money. I mean, I've even thought of, pontoon bridges. Let's float across the lake out there or something like that. We've just got to, if you can imagine anything we put out there that's temporary that spans that spillway is in our way for construction to do it properly. So there's just a lot of variables that throw in there. I still like the pontoon bridge thing, but it's just money.
I'd like to, maybe if possible, once we all get this design set, you said you could provide some of the drawings. Maybe we could provide them to the country club and ask them to invite some of the people that are tying in with the country club, and people that might want to help, local vendors that might want to help. Maybe have a couple of councilmen go with you and have a meeting, or even if everybody wants to attend, maybe call a workshop to have that meeting to see if we can pitch enough ideas around that everybody the community as a whole comes together and fixes this project.
Mr. Thatcher, when you discuss, have they mentioned any funds other than what the city is going to provide?
No, we've not talked about these ideas like Galen talked about, and Councilwoman Spruill also mentioned, community project to fundraisers and so forth. We've basically talked about that they don't have any funds. And as we move forward with this project, it's going to be more economic for just to take care of it in this, and then any money we get back or whatever would be fine. But we don't want to stop this project waiting for fundraisers or whatever. We need to move forward.
Basically speaking, I think what the deal is maybe the country club itself doesn't have the funds to help out, but the people that are attached to it or the companies here in town that understand what that place means to the business here in town, maybe they're willing to help us, not, you know, maybe with construction, maybe cut back on some of the amount of money they might charge, you know, give us discounts on some of the stuff to help us in that area. So that would be, in my mind, how they could help the most.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. I think the thing is that somebody needs to run with that idea that and make that a project, the fundraising. I don't see that as a city, because we're out designing things, trying to get the solution and move forward. And if anybody asks the people, and maybe somebody with country club or somebody ought to say, this is my project, and put together a team of people that'll go. Even some council members can do that. But I don't think the city ought to be the one that raises the money in the community to do the project. And that's a big project in and of itself.
Do we know if there's going to be any funds available? I know the last meeting we had, a couple of meetings ago, you was looking into that, the possibility of getting some help.
I never give up on that, and I'm still looking into it. It's something that we haven't specifically been involved in with a grant to this, because there just aren't many of these that happen. But I'm in the discussions with Trailer and Associates right now, trying to determine if there's something out there. And we're looking for the best return on your investment. We don't want to drag this out with a lot of things. And, just bluntly, our job is to get the ball and take off with it and steamroll till it's done, with the understanding that we have to be considerate of what's happening with the city and with the businesses and things like that. So we're trying to hit a balance there of being bullheaded and bringing the community into it. And that's really what our balance is right now, and why I stutter so much through this.
We appreciate that. We know you understand. We know you understand the concern and how fast we think it needs to be done, but you have to move. Any other questions or suggestions?
I wanted to just add, sorry, Darlene, I need to say this one more thing. She rolls her eyes every time I start talking. So, see, I can see your face. That's the thing. So, we have talked to them. I want to make sure you guys know that we have talked to people that are part of the country club that say they want to be involved and see if they can build some of the bridge or donate, that kind of stuff. So those talks have been going on. Yeah.
I will say this, I believe they have figured out how to play 18 holes on it. They have done some changing around. I think they have to play 10 twice or something like that, but they have figured out how to get an 18-hole game in.
And Lanny, while you're looking for a grant to do some of this, if I have a little extra $15,000, we need it at the library.
That's why I come, to understand that.
Okay, thank you, Lanny. Is there any other questions? If not, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve this agenda item number 12 on the contract with KSA for the work on the Towne Lake Spillway Bridge.
I make a motion we consider approval of contract with KSA for work on the Towne Lake Spillway Bridge.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion made by Councilmember Chappelle and seconded by Councilmember Adams. At this time, Madam Secretary, I'll ask for you to take a vote.
Aye.
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 It was approved unanimously. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 13. Mr. Anthony Razors will address us.
We would like to table this item, if that's okay with you guys. We are going to go out for bids on it, do specs, and go out for bid.
That'll be good. I like that idea. Any questions or suggestions on it?
Anthony, I just want, even though we had an initial quote in here, I just wanted to ask you, did it have all the extra options that you need, or?
It meets all the specs and more that we needed. Yes, sir.
If there's no objection, then this item will be tabled for a further meeting down the line. Thank you.
After we do the specs and go through the proper procedures, we'll bring it back to you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 14, which is to discuss an action to suspend enforcement of temporary signs.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, let me just set the parameters on this, and then looks like there's somebody who wants to speak. We, in the accordance with our code and with the complaints that we've been getting about temporary signs and so forth, we did send out 35 letters, mainly on the south end, 271 south from 41 down south by Walmart. And by the way, John's here and Robert's here to speak on this too. We sent out approximately 35 or so notices. People had questions. We talked to them about it. We've had just really one complaint. Doesn't want to move his portable sign. And then we had one complaint about a off-premises sign. The rest of the folks have complied with it. In fact, if you get a chance to get down by CVS and see all the T-posts that are empty, all the signs are gone. People are removing banners off of buildings and so forth. So we are getting compliance, except for one or two. So, and again, John and Robert are here to answer questions.
Yes, sir. Would you state your name and your address and your?
My name is David Wall. I'm the treasurer of St. Mark's Episcopal Church, 205 East Pecan. We received one of these letters. We've had a sign on the Brahms property just telling people St. Mark's is this way. I've been able to trace it back to 1960. I think it goes back to 1958. Anyway, it's been there a long time. We received the notice. I notified the council that I'd be here tonight. I went to Code and Compliance. They were very cordial, very amenable, more than willing to discuss, but totally unwilling to grant an exemption. Okay, I understand. I told them that I would come here tonight and request a short exemption, to which they had absolutely no problems with. So we do not, there is no problem between me and Code and Compliance, other than the fact that they won't let us have sign up. So I come to you tonight, I am asking for a short exemption. Is there any member of the press here tonight? Okay, what I'm about to say I would like not to be in the paper if possible. St. Mark's is almost at the end of its life. We cannot, with our current income for the last 2 or 3 years, have not been able to pay our own bills. Fortunately, former members who died and left funds that were put into Edward Jones have kept us afloat. And I, as treasurer, my best guess tonight here is that 31 December 2021, St. Mark's Episcopal Church will close. Therefore, I am requesting a 13-month exemption. If you don't grant it, you don't grant it. If you do, and we're still open on 1 January, I will personally go out and take down that sign myself. That's what I come for tonight, is to ask for a 13-month exemption. End of discussion.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. We appreciate the comment.
But I have just a couple of questions I want to ask Mr. Wall. He had sent us an email, and there was a couple of things he stated in there that caught my attention, and I just wanted him to explain to the mayor pro tem, the city manager, and this council why he made these two comments. First one being in the second paragraph, I'm not sure what the city of Mount Pleasant has against the Episcopal Church, and second, in the next to last paragraph, it seems readily apparent that the city of Mount Pleasant must be prejudiced against the Episcopal Church. Can you please explain to me and this council why you made those statements?
That statement was made in the absence of additional information and should be withdrawn.
I appreciate you clarifying that. No, sir.
And Mr. Wall, just for clarity, the property that the sign is sitting on, who owns that property?
I don't have the foggiest idea. I know that Brahms is there.
I was going to say, I don't think it would be on state property because they wouldn't allow it, especially over that period of time. So it has to be on private property.
Thank you, Mr. Wall.
Yeah, at the request of Councilmember Chappelle, I actually went out there and measured it today, and it's about 10 feet onto Brahms' property. It's outside of the right of way.
Does Brahms have any comment on this, just out of curiosity? Do they?
Yeah, we actually went down there and we talked to the manager and asked him about the sign when we were going through the signs. The manager that was on shift at that time said that they didn't want the sign there, but corporate had to make the decision to remove it. It was me and another code enforcement officer that was done it. So I don't know. We haven't reached back out to them, and corporate hasn't got back with us as well.
Of course, that property back in the 60s wasn't Brahms, or even until I forget, the mid-90s when Brahms came in. If I recall right, it burned one time and then they were built back immediately, but that was in the 90s, if I recall, when they bought that property.
When the sign fell down, one of our church members who works building and grounds picked it up and moved it. I saw that it wasn't there. I went in and asked Brahms if they had taken the sign down. And what happened was a 50 or 60-year-old piece of 4x4 or 3x3 rotted and fell down. It was not there. I said, did y'all take down that sign? And they said, no, we have no objections to that sign, and we would not take it down. So I guess the manager that I talked to was different from the one you talked to.
But I would say that, then Kerry could probably say, but before we could give permission for it to stay there, we need to make sure that we have no authority to say Brahms can keep the sign there, I don't believe.
Yeah, Ed, I'd have to agree with you there. I'd get clarification from Brahms and whoever owns that, and it may be some limited partnership, who knows, that owns it. Find out what it is.
We've actually contacted Brahms Corporate ourselves, the code officer and myself have, and we're just waiting for their response, but we haven't heard back from them.
Could we table this item then until we get those responses before we consider anything else about this?
I think you should. I think you really need to.
Anything else, Mr. Walls?
These Episcopal Church signs are located throughout the United States. To my knowledge, there are only 2 cities who are now saying no. One of them is Mount Pleasant, and the other one's Paris, Texas. And I didn't know about Paris until Buildings and Grounds told me that. But they're all over the country. I have no problems with you tabling this matter. waiting for Brahms. So, your choice.
John, I've got a question for you. I was noticing today, if you go back south of where that sign's located, Trinity Christian Church has one at the corner where Farmers Insurance is, and I was just curious, it looks more like a street sign. I just want to make sure that we had issued the same thing to them.
Actually, we missed that when we were going down, or the code officer missed it, but we were notified of it, and a letter was actually mailed out today. And there's also a few on the north side of town, on North Jefferson. We have not, I was waiting to see the outcome of tonight's meeting before we actually mailed those out.
I'd just also like to comment to the council, if we're going to table this, I don't have a problem with that, but I want you to think about something before we do this. When we're talking about temporary signage, my industry uses it a lot, and I noticed several of them had pulled signs up. But if you look at a lot of the restaurants on the south end of town, specifically, a lot of times when we need help, we'll put a help wanted sign out, and I don't have a problem with paying a permit for that if that's what we need to do. But I believe the code actually says, what is it, $35 for 14 days?
Yes, yeah, you're correct. The current one is $35 for 14 days.
So my deal is if we're using it for, Whataburger uses it a lot for their specials or whatever, we really need to consider how long we allow this, because a lot of times people use help wanted signs for, a lot of times they'll leave it out there for 30 days or, whatever. A lot of times these bigger franchises, they run specials once a month and they use that signage. Maybe you extend this for the $35 equals up to, this is a separate issue from Mr. Wall's issue. This is just an issue of something that I've thought of as I've thought about this over the past several days. $35 for a month, $35 for 60 days, whatever you want to do. But there's a lot to consider in this that's beside the fact of off-premises signage. If you're using it for your own premises signage, if we're calling it temporary signage, 14 days is not a long period of time for these guys that are running monthly specials in the restaurant industry. If you're looking for help, I'm telling you today, you can't find help. In 14 days, you're not going to get enough people walking through your door asking to fill out an application, even if you've got a sign out there.
I think what we might want to do is if it's the will of the council, to table this tonight and maybe get a couple of council members together and have a little workshop or a committee or something to look at this after the first of the year, or sign ordinances and see how they need to be addressed. And I think this has been on the book for 30 plus years. There's probably some other tweaking in there that needs to be done, and see what can be worked out on that.
John, I just want to ask, because the agenda says discuss an action to suspend enforcement of temporary signs. So in Mr. Wall's case, are we classifying the church sign as temporary, or why are we, is this two separate, this is two separate topics we're talking, okay, just want clarity on that.
The off-premise sign that Mr. Wall talked about is not on the agenda. This is temporary sign.
And I went down and I did a little bit of homework and got with some neighboring cities. I won't say the cities' names, but Galen, you're right. Like one city, for example, they allow it twice a year for 45 days each time. Another city allows it 5 times a year for 30 days each time. Another city allows you to have multiple signs for 14 days every 3 months. So there are some, but typically what they do is that it's a longer period of time, but then there's a period of time that you can't have it. A couple cities don't allow it at all. Another one allows it for 90 calendar days twice annually. So there are some, ours is a pretty short period of time for 14 days in having to get a permit, but we don't have a break between days either. They could do it 14 days and continuously all year long if they wanted to pay the $35.
I have a question. my question is, Mr. Walls had a question with individual. So when we look at this, is it specific toward an individual that's asking the question, or is it generic for everyone? If you gave the extension, do you have it for everyone, or do you just have?
The thing that I was going to say is that so much of the portable signs, and especially the off-premise signs that Mr. Wall talked about are antiquated. It's history kind of thing. It's back in the history. Nowadays, people use Google. They want to know if there's an Episcopal church in town. They Google it, and then not only do they get a yes, but they get a pleasant lady's voice telling them how to get there, turn here, you've arrived. And so much of it is about putting signs up and down the street that not only are unsightly but are dangerous for motor vehicles or bikes or whatever. And so there's more to think of it at that. The off-premise signs, I don't have a problem with letting the Episcopal Church keep it another year. I just question how effective it is. The other thing is on the signs, if somebody needs help, we have social media today in how people find jobs and wanted things and stuff, and rather than clutter up your community. That's my opinion. But I think putting a group together to relook about how we do it is important. One of the things we've heard several times is this has been here for 30 years. We've been able to do this for 30 years. And it's interesting to me that seems to be the theme here in town. We've done everything wrong for 30 years. And it seems a coincidence that seems to run parallel with certain people who have been in charge for 30 years, and they just let things go. And that's kind of where we are. We're about to the point of being a real city and not Mayberry.
But I do have a question just for and uniformity. Normally when code enforcement does something, many times they'll go and they will talk to individuals before they send letters. That's I've seen it both ways. I've been here all my life. Sometimes they will talk to the individuals and they don't issue the letter. Then sometimes they issue a letter. I would just wonder what the procedure is, because you're going to end up with the same problem that we've had for years around here. Some people get letters and some don't, and then you'll have people bring back to the council a major issue that you talked about for years with code enforcement is, why did one set of people get a letter and the other folks didn't get a letter? So my question is, as we go to this, is that we make sure that it's standard. And like, for instance, where you missed that sign out there, this is a small town. And that set of folks noticed that you didn't contact that person, but you contacted me. And I'm just making, my concern is, when you go out and you do these things, that we make sure that it's standard for everyone. And it doesn't look like someone is being, I'm not saying anyone is selected, but you make sure that there's a standard procedure that we're going case by case and we're studying it like it's supposed to be. Because over the years, I've been all my life, and that has been a major question. How come some people get letters and others ones don't? And we need to be really careful when you go in and you get what some people call major and some folks call minor, because it wasn't long ago we were getting these complaints about the grass being on the sidewalk, those type of things. And then you see on one section of town, they got a letter. Other folks on another side of town didn't get a letter. So I'm just asking that as you go through these procedures, that we make sure that we make a conscious effort to make sure that everybody is given the law that they're scheduled to comply with.
Let me comment on that. I agree 100% with the councilman, whatever his name is, Jerry Walker. And so in doing that, rather than, we send them out, we find out that we miss some, we send others. We started on the south side of town, rather than getting all of them and sending out 6,000 at one time, and then it would be chaotic. So we have a process. We do that part of town, then we do this part of town. And so I'm saying, if you want us to be, everybody get it, then don't stop us in the middle of the process. We're just starting it. Now, we don't have the people to go out and talk to each one. We send them a letter, and those that have questions call, and we work it out. a lot of people get offended because we sent them a letter and we didn't show up at their door. We don't have the manpower to do that, but we can do that, but it'll take us a year or 2 or 3 to go through everything. So we'd ask every time somebody complains, don't stop us in the middle of the process. Let us get all the letters out and see how much compliance we get. But what happens is we'll send a few out, then some jump up and complain, and then the council stops us, and then we get the situation. Some got it and some didn't. And I would submit that that's not the staff's fault. Our process, send the letters out, get compliance. Those who have problems we talk to, but the first one that jumps up and says, change the ordinance because I don't like this, that's where we get stopped. And so the way to get it all out is to let us finish our process, and then everybody will get the letter.
And just to kind of elaborate on what Mr. Thatcher said, typically we start with, I wish we could do the whole city at one time, but typically we start with an area. Like another thing that's going to become it's not going to become a big deal, but to get done is addressing. I don't know if you guys have been through our town, but addressing is pretty bad on houses, on businesses. And so when we hit a street, we'll try to hit virtually the whole street, but we can't go through every single street in the entire city and send out all those notices at one time. So we kind of take a street or a block range at a certain time, and we kind of hit that and then go to the next one and so forth.
I just want to make sure now this is something that was not being enforced at all, and I understand that it is there for a reason. We are currently trying to set up a set of standards, and a few months back we adjusted some of the permits and changed some of that. We're trying to set standards up, and we're trying to follow those standards as we go. This is just another one that's been in place that has not been done. And sometimes when you do that, I understand it takes some time to get people into the swing of it. But as we start thinking about these things, I don't have a problem with the way it's written, honestly. I just want to make sure that it's not something that they've been held to. So if we apply the letter and go, hey, here's your letter, here's some time to get in compliance, I understand, you haven't been done, and we go forward from here. But all it is we're trying to set up standards, and I agree with the letter of the law. I agree with the way it's done because it is a nuisance. But I also understand that there are some even major food chains that utilize temporary signage. So I'm not sure the 14 days is actually enough, because most of those guys utilize a 30-day advertisement period. So it's just something to think about as we go forward.
This is not just food service by no means, and I know that's not what this is banks, and this is all over, that people put up. Is it the will of the council? Do you have any more questions for John, or?
I also am always heavily concerned with non-chains, mom and pop establishment. I believe that most of them have struggled more recently with COVID, and small mom and pop businesses. The chains seem to be doing better. They have more online sales and many deeper pockets. And I am for uniformity and keeping our city with standards and enforcing them. I think there's a time and a place for everything. In this particular item tonight, temporary signage, I hate to bear down, and I'll just use an example. As I get older, it doesn't happen as much, but when I was younger, I had a lead foot. And there was many times, and it would be a small infraction, sometimes more, but at many times, at least in the past, that officer had some discretion that pulled me over to issue me a warning if he felt like that I deserved a warning. That was discretionary, even though I probably exceeded the law or the speed limit or illegal lane change, whatever the infraction was. And sometimes I was cited. okay, and I had to pay a price for that. I think that we do need to be considerate, if we can, of the needs of the local businesses. Right now, I hate to get heavy-handed on, I don't want to say it's not important, but I want to do everything we can to give these people a chance to survive this COVID situation. And if running a special, having out a sign, I don't even want to have to make them pay the $35 right now. So I would like to suspend temporarily the enforcement of temporary signs. Maybe, I think we soon need to visit. I looked at our ordinance a little bit. It's lengthy about all signs in town. I think it's time for the council to reevaluate our entire sign ordinance, possibly line by line. And of course, that would include this at that time. I'm not taking up for anybody, any one entity. I have nobody in mind except in general. I just hear it on a daily, weekly basis how some businesses are struggling. And I, as a city, want to be able to offer them I understand, we don't want ratty signs half falling over that are out of date, that are inappropriate. I do see there's some setbacks on the lots, and there's supposed to be one per street. I did glance at the code some. And so that's my concern. I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help and not put any extra burden on small businesses or organizations. I know food banks are struggling. I know that donation shelters are struggling to get donations. Everybody's struggling right now in lots of ways. So that's my concern, council. I understand, and I want a clean, neat, well-kept city and enforced equally and all that stuff too. So I'm actually ready to suspend enforcement of this temporary sign issue until we get a chance to revisit our entire sign code.
I'd like to just say I get a little confused here because I think what you said about contact and be nice is what we've done. I don't think we were heavy-handed. We take their questions. We even show them how we can help them or whatever. And in the analogy of the police officer, I'm sure when he gave you a warning like what we've done, I don't think he probably left and said, "Now it's suspended. You can speed all you want for a while." They probably said, "Now you got to be in compliance, and I won't give you another ticket." So that's a little confusing. What I would recommend, if you want to suspend it, give us a date that it's going to come back, because it'll all come back again. Or if you suspend it for, I don't want to give a date, just suspend it for whatever, then just say we want to suspend it and we'll get on with it. But suspending it till COVID's over that's not a date specific, and we need a date specific.
So this agenda is bearing on the suspension, but there was no proposed timeline, so you want us, Ed, to determine how long that suspension needs to be for the temporary signs? Is that what I'm understanding?
Because more than half have complied already. So what do we do with them?
18 out of the 35 have already complied, including Whataburger, Walmart, Preferts, the agricultural place there on the corner, grocery stores. Yeah, and the thing is the complaint was actually filed by a pretty big corporation against another business here in town. But, I can understand if you want to put on hold the off-premise signs for churches. There's probably about 5 or 6 in town. I think with the temporary signage, if we want to look at maybe giving them a little bit longer time, but let us continue to enforce the ordinance. For example, she said to use some judgment when making these recommendations. We've had businesses come in that had lobby now open due to COVID. So we've given them 30, 35 days to have that sign out. So we've given them longer time because we know the effect that it's had on their businesses. But if it's just a, nutrition store advertising a sale on muscle milk, I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, is that the, the same kind of concern, or can they come pay their 14 days, or do we want to extend it to 30 days? Or, look at the ordinance and revise it to 30 days. But I think if we stop now, another thing to consider is off-site signage. We had a business give virtually, I don't know how many employees, but a lot of their employees signs to put all over town. So if we suspend it, you're going to start getting businesses putting stuff all over. These were put on residential lots, they were put on commercial lots. We pulled 2 today that were stuck in front of Walgreens on the, where we normally have our nonprofit stuff, but it was for a specific business that had their employees had put a couple signs out there. So those are the kind of things that are going to continuously come up if we suspend it completely.
It would give us time to work on an ordinance with you guys involved or whatever, but I would have enough time. I wouldn't do 30 days or 2 weeks or 60 days. I'd do 6 or 7 months.
Well, I was talking about extending it, instead of doing 14 days, extending the temporary sign permit for 30 days or something until COVID's over. You know, give them more time.
I wasn't saying that we needed to do away with the temporary signage deal. I agree with it. The businesses that utilize it the most, I expect them to come in and pay the permit fee, so we'll know it's up, and then it gives us a date that we can go back and see if it's down. I'm not for suspending the enforcement of temporary signage. Off-premises signage is something completely different.
That's very different.
If, y'all need to find out about the Brahms issue for Mr. Walls, just to start with, okay? And then we'll go from there. But if we're just talking about enforcing temporary signage, it's obviously there for a reason, and we know what it is. If one's enough, then what about 2? Well, if 2's not enough, what about 3? You get into a big deal. The 14 days may not be enough, but the fact that it's there is not the problem. It needs to be there.
Do we have any more comments or suggestions, or what's the will of the council on this? That we need want to just table this, or
Either make a motion and let's get it done, or we're talking about temporary signage.
make a motion for what amount of time?
Y'all pick it, because I'm not gonna vote to suspend it.
I think if we are going to put this off for a short period of time, I personally would like to have a workshop, if we can, to revisit our entire sign code. I saw some things in it I thought were kind of outdated, and as I glanced through it. Having a senior moment, y'all bear with me. I want to be sensitive to everybody. The people that did comply, if we're going to hold off, then I would like to tell them that if they need to put their signs back out, I don't want to just pick on, since they did voluntarily comply, I think we should offer them the opportunity to go back and put it during this temporary period until we get it, if the council votes to do that. Don't make it fair for everybody. If they took their sign up and they want to put it back. And we need to notify them if we know who those, y'all seem to know who they are that took them up. And if they want to put them, if we're going to suspend it for the rest that hasn't yet, then they need the opportunity to use their signs until we get to the end of this possible reevaluating our entire sign code.
We've also had I think it's 2, maybe 3 that have paid, and we'll just notify them they can request a refund if y'all decide to move that direction. Yeah.
Because we do want to be fair to everybody. Okay. Yes, thank you.
So is this still separate from that example you gave us of the one company that's had employees going around and plastering signs everywhere?
Well, if you suspend the temporary sign ordinance, they would be able to. I mean, we wouldn't have any. I mean, it'd still be off-premise signs, but if we're kind of tabling that too until we can get more information, I mean, we wouldn't really have anything to go after them with.
I see a big difference in a business using their front or their property for employment or a special they're running or something, trying to get, we're reopened, all these things. That, to me, that's a totally different issue than off-premise signs. I personally would like to, if we can enforce that part of it's the temporary signs in front of individual owned places, their own signage. As long as they're within they're not in the right of way and all of that. As far as the enforcement of the permit or them being able to use it, I think that's what I'm personally wanting to look at, and then redecide what we need to do on time limits, how many signs, all the particulars about temporary signs.
Yeah, and it's two separate. The off-premise sign is in the general sign requirement, but it's also in the temporary sign requirement. So it's in both sections. So if we want to just, I guess, put a moratorium on the off-premise temporary sign requirement versus the off-premise general requirement, we can.
I'd like to say before that we think very carefully, because it has to be standard and uniform, because they're going to have y'all scattered running from here to New York City. You can see that coming. If you do it like that, they're going to be all over, and it's not many people in code enforcement. You'll have folks everywhere. And if you leave that temporary sign like that, that person that's putting that one side on the north end, he'll be on the south end. Then the other person will come back, and then you'll just have a worse mess than you already have. Because in government work, in any bureaucracy, there must be uniformity and standardization. When you go out and you begin to separate things, and you itemize things out in the middle, you create a greater problem. And I just think we need to make sure that we're going to have a uniform. That's when you have government code, which is a series of reports that you look at. Because if you structure this thing where everybody's going out everywhere, you all won't be able to keep up with it. There's no way in the world you can keep up with it. And then when you do that for one set of people, there are folks who are not necessarily looking right now, but when you begin to do it, you could have a problem. Because the government code down there is structured for the code of the law for structure. And if we begin to variate here and there, I don't know where you end up. Because that's the reason maybe we need to look at looking at the code and then make a decision on the standard set of codes that we're going to deal with, than to go out and begin to make individual decisions on different things. Because if not, you're going to have too many. I don't see where code enforcement can keep up with it in a town this size. Because if you put those rules like that, they're going to begin to call in, and then when you miss a few signs on this side, they're going to come back on another side. And then when you let that one person on, he's on this side, and you see people all over town with those little clown suits or whatever you call it, and they're on this end of town today, and they're on that end of town tomorrow. And I just think you're going to create a greater problem if you go back and let's like we already have one now. When you go back and you have a set of rules where you've already selectively enforced them on some people, and other folks are not having to comply with it. And then if you go back and you take it off people, and then you put it back on it, you're going to have a greater problem. So I think we just need to stop and look at the code and study it and see exactly what we plan to. 35 years ago, the rules were different than they are now. But I think we need to go back and look at that code and then come back and make a decision based on a current code for 2020.
I think you need to, the code's in place now. I don't have a problem looking at the code and adjusting the code, but what's in place now? Code enforcement is already in touch with Mr. Wall. They're working on that issue. We can deal with that as it comes forward. But the code on temporary signage is in place. We need to leave it in place. If y'all want to look at the code and change the code, we look at the code and change the code at a later date. But you've got to have something in place today. Either do away with it today or continue it today.
And to kind of echo Mr. Walker there, I don't think it'll look good on the city to go back to those we've already had them make corrections and then tell them they can go put their signs back, because that's we're wishy-washy. So it doesn't look good from a PR standpoint for us to go back and renege on this deal when we're already trying to enforce what Mr. Adams said is already there in the books. And they're in the books there for a reason. So I don't personally think that we as a city should go back to those 18 or so that's already complied and tell them they can put their signs back. Because they're going to be like, what do you do? You told me yesterday I had to take my sign out. Now you come back today and tell me I can put it back. Right, so we're going to create, like Mr. Walker said, some confusion. And I just want to try to avoid that. But at the same time, like Ms. Sproul said, I want to step back and let us reevaluate the entire line by line if that's what it takes to make some tweaks and modifications. But we've already got a set of standards that are in place. It's been there for a long time. And I just don't think it'll look good to the city if we go back and tell them, hey, you know, I came here yesterday and told you to take your sign down because you're in violation, but I'm coming back today because the council decided to say, we're going to go ahead and let you put your sign back.
So if we choose to make a motion and vote to say go to June 1st, and then by then we should have a chance to have workshops and whatever we need, and we're just gonna, because of a lot of extenuating circumstances, I really thought that when we revisited the permits and the new fees that we put in place and starting to enforce those issues, we gave the community a chance, the people to speak up, and we had a workshop on that issue. We may not have to have it on a sign, but we engaged them before we made some pretty big changes and some pretty big fee adjustments. It gave them a chance to get involved if they chose to. And because this is their community too, and it affects them. And signage really affects businesses and organizations. And it can be, you know, very, very detrimental or very much a help to them, whichever way it goes. So I like the idea of on these, when we're visiting and starting to enforce many things that have been overlooked in this city for a long, long time, it kind of comes as a shock. But I think when we engage them and then we give them a chance to speak, give their concerns, their comments, and we made a few adjustments in our decision because of the meetings that we had with the contractors and builders and things. And I would just like to give them a chance, if they care, to speak up about this, to hear from the local businesses mainly, and like I said, organizations, everybody that would, you know, uses signage, even down to garage sale signs. I mean, all of it. And make sure that we're here to serve the whole city to the best of our ability that works best for everybody. And so I just want to give them a chance to speak up. And, you know, it takes a minute sometimes. We're sitting here talking about it. You guys are thinking about it. It comes as a shock to some of them. And so I am absolutely for an ordinances, and all of that goes with it, and enforcement. But I also like to be considerate as we make these sweeping changes and to bring our city up into a more standardized city. And I think we're doing great getting there.
Can I say, Sherry, that the sweeping changes that we're making, I don't know that we're making sweeping major changes. The only major change we're doing is starting to enforce a code that's been on the books for 30-some years. And we've had a staff in the past that's just ignored it. And so the sweeping changes to, I mean, I don't know. I guess the question to the citizens are, to enforce it or not. I mean, I don't think that we're making changes to the sign ordinance at all. We're just enforcing it. That's been there forever.
The sweeping changes, Ed, is that we're beginning to be more transparent in our bookkeeping and all the accountabilities to the citizenry. And we are making some big changes the way the whole city is organized. It is set up. It is standardized in many levels. This is a very personal level to those people that need to use temporary signage.
Ed, can I ask, did it start from a complaint, or we just started enforcing?
I just think that, I hear where we're going with this, and I think we need to be careful, is that we need to be transparent, so we need to call a meeting every time we want to follow the code. Maybe we ought to do it with the police department and see if the people like these speeding tickets and so forth. I mean, that sounds silly, but that's kind of where I think we're going. We've got a code. We send a letter out, notify them, this is the code, this is where we are. That's what brings them in. We've got to notify people that we're going to talk about the code. We can do it on social media. Come on in, we want to talk about it, whatever, and get the word out. We can also send these letters out and say, this is the code, this is what you're supposed to do. And those that want to discuss it, they can come in. And I was told there'd be another guy was going to be here today, but he didn't come. I think that what Mr. Walls talked about, that can be dealt with kind of like what he put out. I think that'd be fine. But I just think we got to be careful that we don't have to go back out after our staff is doing the right thing, and we classify it as that we were heavy-handed, that we weren't transparent. I mean, those all things are not. I don't agree that that's what that was at all.
And I would say the one other complaint that we got, I mean, was from someone that has a $30,000 sign sitting beside a $250 banner. You know?
But I will say that the city has ordinances for a reason. They're there for a reason. They were put in place for a reason. And if we don't enforce them, what's the sense of the city even having a single ordinance? So if we're going to maintain a set of standards and maintain our ordinances as they are, and going forward, if we may amend one here or there, they do us no good unless we enforce them.
I just say, I mean, I personally believe that we leave the temporary signage order in place, give code enforcement the ability to work with the people and to help them get into compliance. If it's a special situation, you bring the special situation to us. Other than that, I don't see a problem.
I think $35 for 14 days is too much money.
Well, we can address that at a later date if you want to address it. We can adjust that. We can adjust the code anytime we want to, but taking the code away, I agree. I agree with $35 should be more than 14 days. But I'm not going to suspend the code with my vote just for that one issue. We can change that issue down the road, but we're talking about doing away with it or keeping it in place today.
May I say? In addition, the other issue is, can we not also make the determination and then put a time frame on the permit from the 14 to a longer period of time and maintain the same code in order as it is written?
Kerry, can we change the date and time now, or do we have to bring that up at a later time?
Councilman, are you talking about all we have on the agenda tonight about temporary signs? I know David's brought up this or whatever. You talking about amending the ordinance? It's not on the, it's not here. It's not here. You know, all you can do is say, you know, instruct these guys that we want a moratorium on enforcement on this particular item right here. Mr. Wall's issue. That's where you are, and that's what you can do tonight, and that's all that's on the agenda as far as that goes. I mean, having been through this issue about 35 years ago with those flashing signs and whatever, it's been there. You know, it's a never-ending issue, and so I guess that's why I didn't said a whole lot, because you guys just got to hash it out and figure out where you want to go with it. But that's where you are tonight on it. And I fully agree. You know, you need to sit down. You got everything from billboards to whatever else in your ordinance, and you really do. And we need to sit down and go line by line by line. That's not going to happen between now and the end of the year. Particularly, it wouldn't happen anyway. It's sure not going to happen during the COVID. So, you know, that's where you are on this. You just need some guidance for these guys out here that are enforcing it and whatever. And, you know, and if it comes to city court, I assure you, the judge will be very, very, I mean, it's going to be very reasonable. I mean, you know, people are going to take into effect if it gets that far. I mean, somebody thinks files, you know, I'm certainly going to take a look at it. Guidance. So this is where you are tonight, right here. It says temporary signs. I'm just asking for some kind of moratorium if you want to put a time and date on it or not do anything. That's where, you know, that's where you are.
Okay, any other questions or suggestions before we?
So if we do make a motion and we say we'll revisit this March the 1st, give it about 90 days, whatever that, does, and we suspend the $35 permit fee to give them a chance to adjust their way of doing, if we do that. So the ones that did comply, that's my concern, that they've already had some people take their signs. Now, some of those signs possibly were just out of date anyhow, and they've just been leaving them up, some of those folks. Maybe they weren't in effect anymore. We don't know. I don't know that, how serious they needed those signs. And they may decide, with a fee that it's not that important, whatever. I get all that. I just don't want to hurt anybody right now that we can not hurt. We waived late fees for a while for water bill payment to give people a chance to work through their issues, making adjustments. We decided to waive that for a while, I believe, late fees, fees. And so I agree. I think we need to have a good, enforceable, reasonable sign ordinance and enforce it equally. But right now, I just hate to hurt people until they get a chance to adjust, that we are going to be more standardized with our codes and with our enforcement and fees, etc.
Mayor and Council, one thing, if we decide to suspend the $35 fee, we need to put a limit of how long they can keep it out, because we have one lady that has come back and have asked for a year worth of permits. There's nothing in the code that keeps them from doing that. So she's got a year worth of permits. Every 14 days she gets another one. She's already paid the $35. It's $900 and some. And so without that fee, what keeps people from doing that. So without that fee, we need to have, you can only do it for 30 days or 45 days or 60 days, whatever. And then you can't do it anymore. Once a year, you can do that, like we were said, or we'll have everybody just file for 2 or 3 years worth of permits, because our code doesn't disallow that.
And that's one of the things we need to address in our code.
But if we suspend the fee tonight, we need to put in a limit tonight, or we're going to have everybody. You know what I'm saying? We shouldn't wait to put the limit in at another time and take the fee out today. That would be, Robert, you have.
Kind of like Kerry, I've seen these things for, I don't know how many years, 35 years probably. I've been dealing with portable temporary signs back in the day when there were those arrows and lighted, and all cities were trying to get rid of them, and it took us forever and a day. And we got into our sign, or I'm just giving you the heads up on sign codes. They're one of the most difficult things for cities to tackle. They're difficult to get a uniform code that works for everybody. And then if people that are trying to do it, there's never really anybody that's an expert at writing sign code. Sign code is very difficult. I've seen cities, last one of Rockwall, I worked in Rockwall, that we had a sign code that wasn't in the zoning code. It was regulated as a regulatory code, so the city council could change it. And it was like every 6 months, somebody would have a complaint, and we were back at the drawing board correcting the sign code and trying to make something work for somebody that had a problem with the existing sign code. So it can be one of these things. It can be a can of worms, the sign code. But as far as the only real issue I can see is that in order to keep control on this thing, you've got 14 days in the permit. We've got to have it permitted, or we can't control it, because we don't know who's got what out there. The guys it's like a bookkeeping thing on these things. If we can't bookkeep it, we can't figure out who's putting up a sign and who's not putting up a sign. So honestly, it's a point. I think Carrie's saying the same thing I think we would say. If you really want to do something with this, we could amend just that portion to either change the time, like extend it for 30 days with a permit, or whatever time you decide it's best for. But we don't want to throw it out, what do we call it, the baby out with the bath water, you know. That's saying, if you'll consider just taking that portion of the code today, and if you want to do something like you suggest, either adjust the fee, or I don't think the fee's wrong. I think it's the time. I think it's the time. Yeah, that's not today, but I think that's the way to adjust it. And you could do that. We could do that relatively quickly if you focused in on one part of it. Well, we could bring it back at least within 30 days. We could probably make that adjustment, and it wouldn't set the precedent that we would set by stopping what Mr. Thatcher's saying, going back, telling these people, no, we made a mistake. We're going to let you have it this much. We've taken your money, but we're kind of reversing our position. I think the better thing is to move forward and maybe figure out a way of amending just that portion of the code. And if we could do that in 30 or 45 days, get it done, then I think everybody's going to be happy with that. That should be a better solution. That's just an opinion, I would tell you.
So,
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
I make a motion that we leave the law just like it's written and enforce it like it is, and if we have any additional changes, we do it at another time. But as far, leave it as it's written.
well, I just had one question for John or Robert. Do we know how many temporary sign permits we have today for those who do it the right way?
I know we got 2, maybe 3 that have, since we've sent out the notices, have actually come down and paid for the permit fee. Other than that, out of the 35, 18 have already complied by removing them.
But we don't know citywide how many people are in compliance now. People are.
And in fairness to the people that got the initial wave of letters, and it might take you how long to get everybody a letter to keep this across, you see what I'm saying? Because they're going, well, I had to take mine down, but they've still got theirs up.
Sure, that's going to happen, and what we'll let them know is we'll probably work, since we've already started there, we'll work from the south side north and let them know, yeah, they're within the next couple of weeks, they're going to get a notice as well.
You think everybody in town that within reason, I know you can accidentally overlook one, but you're going to work all the city for this issue within the next 2 or 3 weeks to get everybody a letter that needs one.
In the main thoroughfares, yeah. Now, if there's some little off-street stuff that we might not hit, but the main thoroughfares would be covered, which would be 30, Ferguson, 16th, Jefferson, Madison, etc.
Once we start doing that, we're going to hear about the other ones and we'll get them all done within 30 days.
Okay. Then we have a motion by Councilmember Walker, second by Councilmember Adams, that we leave the enforcement of the temporary signs in place and review it on a basis as it comes up, the as need basis. I'm going to refer to it as. With that, Madam Secretary, would you record the vote, please?
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
It was 3-1 to leave the enforcement of temporary signs in place, so it passed 3-1. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 14, which is public comment. Do we have anyone in the public that would like to make a comment? If so, please come forward, state your name, your address. Yes, sir.
Dave Wall again. The city or code compliance is going to notify me one way or the other. Can you tell me well, it doesn't matter which office does it, but we are so small and so unmanned, we only check the mailbox on Saturdays. So I'm hoping the decision is you'll grant the exemption, but if you don't, give me more than 48 hours because I may not see it for 3 or 4 days.
We appreciate you, Mr. Walls, and yes, John, if you don't have his cell phone number, why don't you get it? Y'all exchange numbers where you can be in personal contact with each other. Will be fine. We appreciate your being here tonight. Madam Secretary, do we have any online comments?
David, Mr. Wall, just want to let you know we're going to be praying for you and your church family.
With that, we'll move on to item number 15. A city manager's report.
Mayor and council, I just have one thing tonight, and that is that on the lease purchase of the cars, remember we did half of the money we spend every year for cars, 4 or 5 cars, about 100,000. We did it with a lease with Enterprise, and then we've been in conversations with the local dealership to do a program that they presented to us. They've not been able to give us anything in writing. I talked to a representative there a little over 2 weeks ago. It was prior to our last meeting, and he didn't have anything in writing, but thought he would get it to us. And I said, we're not going to put it on this meeting, but we'll put it on the next one, first one in December. And I haven't heard anything since. So what I want to inform you that we're going to do is put together another lease with Enterprise for the rest of our fleet, for the other 100,000. It'll take care of all that. And so we're talking with the Enterprise rep and our department directors and McHale. And so it won't be next meeting, but probably the first meeting in January, or one of the meetings in January. We're back with another contract to approve to do the rest of our fleet.
Do they indicate what's the holdup?
They just said they didn't have anything in writing. He was going to try to put what he said in writing. He did send us something, but then the deal was different from what he said orally and so verbally. So I called him back and he said, no, it's the way I said it. I said, well, we need something in writing that explains that. And he said, I'll get you something, and I think I can do that. And then I just haven't heard from him.
Okay. With that, do we have any comments from the council members before we adjourn?
I have a comment. I'd like to thank the city manager and the staff for the Christmas lights downtown. I've been here all of my life. I don't think it's ever looked like that in my 54 years of being here. And I want to thank all the hard work and dedication that's been given for the lights as well as the park at this point in time during this. And I think it's a very good, I've gotten comments all over town and they're on Facebook. We thank you for the hard work that you've done. And we're grateful for anything that we can grow and develop and make Mount Pleasant a better place.
I've probably had more comments about that than any single thing that we've ever done since I've been on the council. People just calling, and you have to always remember things have to be above and beyond what their I call it customers' expectations before or below. So when this has definitely been above, and they've appreciated it. I think they've the carriage rides, all of that. It's very neat. My wife and I had the opportunity to do that, and I recommend it to anyone that can find an open spot and be able to do it. It's fun.
Yes, I saw the TV commercial with you and your wife in the carriage on the Channel 3 News. Scott said he paused it and we recorded it. We've got our Mayor Pro Tem and his wife enjoying a carriage ride, and I wanted to say the same thing. I've been downtown a few nights just kind of perusing around, and there has been a host of people enjoying the courthouse, even up till 10, 11 o'clock at night. I hope it's good for them to enjoy. I hope it's helping the commerce downtown. I think it will. I hope the stores will take advantage. I know it's hard to stay open late, but sometimes that's, I think that their best business may come late in the evening right now. I hope they're able to take advantage of this effort to stay open a little later, maybe go down and hand out something to say, hey, visit our store, here's a little 10% off, or things like this. We've done, I agree. I've heard so many things like, wow, kind of the wow factor. So I'm really thrilled, and I know we're going to build on that in the next few years, and I think it's just going to be a big draw and for the community and for the businesses.
I wanted to just say that we still have some things coming because of COVID and the materials not being available, and we didn't get things built like we wanted. So I've been told that by this weekend, all the entry features will have the lights and so forth on them. And then we need some more done over in Caldwell Park on the gazebo and stuff. So there should be the last parts of it coming in this week. And I do want to say that everything is evolving. And, we took all of our wreaths, some 60 or 75 or so, and they redid each one and put the red ribbon and put lights on them. And then, not knowing where to go, they just put them back up and down Jefferson, and they weren't connected to electricity or whatever. And I'm talking with Sherry about that, and she was saying, gosh, we got to do something. You don't even see them in the day, you don't see them at night. And so we walked around the square. Ricky and I walked around the square and looked at it one evening, and all of a sudden we noticed these decorative poles. And I said, I don't know if they fit on there. So I asked Ricky the next day. These guys came in. Not only do they fit on there, but there's a plug on each one of them to plug them in. And so all of a sudden they lit up. And when you put them all down in one area, like it just makes a difference. Caldwell Park has them, and it makes the difference. And so that came from Sherry. We hope to have more next year. We'll do a little more in Caldwell and so forth. You notice there's a tree up in Caldwell, came up today or yesterday. That is that's the hospice that has a tree lighting. They're going to do that this week or next week. It's Friday this week. They'll turn the lights on that, and then it'll be wired in to come on with all of ours now on. So the Main Street Board has been working really well. They really support it, and the downtown merchants have been really good. And so,
Any of you that have an opportunity to go to the lighting of the Cypress Basin Hospice Christmas tree, it's recommend you stopping by. And again, thanks so much to the city staff and the administration for what you've done with the Christmas.
One more thing that we're finding out, we didn't expect it to be a gathering place in the evening, late into 10:30 and 11, but it is. And so we had the corn dog guy come back and open up every night, but it's been a gathering thing like we've never seen, never expected. And the other thing we're finding is that a lot of people are coming out of Dallas because of our little advertisements there, and they want it's funny, the advertisement is come out to a Hallmark city with a quaint whatever, and they coming out for the evening and dinner and buying things, coming out on Saturday for the day. I've got friends that have come out, and some more coming out this week because they want to get away and get out of big town and come out and then go back, stay overnight. So it's working like we hoped it would. But
I think it's a gathering place. I've gathered some of them corn dogs up.
I also wanted to let Ricky and his crew know that I've gotten positive comments on all the new playground equipment that's been installed. So we thank the city for doing that, and the citizens really appreciate that for their kids and know that it's safer equipment for them to play on.
The trimming of the trees out by the city lake on 271 looks nice too. Been out through there several times the last few days. Looks very nice. Okay, if nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion made and second.